Hello and welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I'm of course your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 284th episode, our guest is Martha C. Lawrence. A former editor at Simon Schuster and Harcourt, Martha C. Lawrence has shaped the voices of some of the world's most successful thought leaders. As executive editor at Blanchard, she has collaborated with Ken Blanchard for more than 20 years, including on Trust Works, winner of the San Diego Book Award. Her editing credits include multi-million copy bestsellers and #1 New York Times titles. She is also the author of an Edgar, Anthony, Agatha and Shamus-nominated mystery series featuring private investigator Elizabeth Chase. Martha holds a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and studied creative writing at the New School in New York City. She was a founding faculty member of the Jolla Writers Conference and has been a book reviewer for the San Diego Union-Tribune. Outside of her professional life, she is an avid hiker and a longtime yoga practitioner. She lives in Escondido, California, with her partner and a full contingent of backyard wildlife. Lawrence is passionate about leadership, storytelling, and capturing legacies that matter. Learn more at marthalawrence.com. Her new book, Catch People Doing Things Right: How Ken Blanchard Changed the Way the World Leads, will be published by Barrett Kohler Publishers on October 21st. And now on to the show.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How do I sound?
You sound great.
Awesome.
So good.
Oh, I am so sorry about yesterday. I had like 200 emails in my inbox after getting back from Kauai, and everything was just crazy. So my apologies.
No problem. How was Hawaii?
Oh, the land of ukuleles. You'd love it. I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, it's so magical. It's just heaven on earth, really.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this evening. I appreciate it.
Well, I have been listening to your podcast and I really dig it, I have to tell you.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. But yeah, for people who are listening who don't know who you are, would you mind just go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
Oh, okay. My name is Martha Lawrence, and I am an author. Right now, I'm letting people know about the book I most recently published called Catch People Doing Things Right: How Ken Blanchard Changed the Way the World Leads. And it's about an amazing kind of business guru who really, the heart of him is just that if you're in business, you need to lead with love. And it's not about top-down control. It's not about, making people wrong. It's about catching them doing right and, creating positive energy around you. So that's why I'm excited about the book.
Great. And yeah, so it's one of the most popular books ever. So it probably goes without saying for some people, but who is Ken Blanchard and what's kind of the thing that people would know him for?
Well, yeah, certainly I think your audience, your listeners kind of skew younger is my guess, Rob. So
probably, yeah, I would guess so.
Yeah, this may be a boomer thing, but in the 80s, Ken Blanchard published a book called The 1 Minute Manager. And it's hard, I think, for people to understand, like when a book became a bestseller back then, because there were only a few publishers and there were only like 3 major news stations, and so it became such a big deal. It was on TV shows. It was on the bestseller list for like years and years and years, and everybody had read that book. And what was so different about it was that business books used to be really dry and boring, and Ken Blanchard and his co-author Spencer Johnson came along and wrote like a business parable about a guy who was looking for an effective manager. And it was just like really fun to read. You could read it in like an hour, and it just sold a gajillion copies, literally like tens of millions of copies around the world. So, but I met Ken. I knew about that book. I was an editor back in New York at the time that book came out. I'm definitely an old lady. I was working at Simon and Schuster in New York, so I was well aware of that book and never imagined that I would actually meet Ken Blanchard, let alone become his, executive editor, which is what I was for and have been for 20 years. And why I decided to write this biography about him is because here was a guy who was told in college that he couldn't write. By his own admission, he couldn't even balance his own checkbook, and yet he founded one of the most successful leadership development organizations in the world. And he has just had such a fascinating life, and I just had to write a book about him. So that's the story.
Yeah. And it was funny when I was reading your book. I stopped reading about a third of the way through, and I was like, okay, I think I just need to go read the 1 Minute Manager before I go any further.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did, and then later on, after I went back to your book, that somebody had described it as the perfect bathtub book. You could read it, and that's exactly what I did. I read it exactly during the space of one bath.
That's hilarious. I know that's what the publisher said.
That way, because it was like, yeah, that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, because it's really not that complicated. They try to make, business management so complicated and complex. And I don't know if there are so many people who have bad bosses out there. I mean, we all know them. I've had them. I'm sure you've had them. And it doesn't take much to be a good boss. And so, yeah, Ken and Spencer came up with these three secrets of the 1 Minute Manager, 1 minute goal setting, 1 minute praisings, which is, catching people doing things right. Because, I think a lot of managers think their job is to just sit around and wait until someone makes a mistake and then jump all over them. And that is the most demotivating thing you can do to someone. So it's like reversing this psychology. There's also something we have called negativity bias, and it's actually a survival mechanism. That's how our species survived. We surveyed the environment, and if something looked sketchy, we jumped on it before it killed us. So we have that wired into our medulla oblongatas, but we have to overcome that when we're working with people. And then the third secret is 1 minute redirects, which it used to be called 1 minute reprimands, but that's, kind of condescending, and they updated that to redirects because leadership is really a side-by-side thing. You don't have even the language of a supervisor and subordinate, super and sub implies that there's a hierarchy, and that might work for the military, but it really doesn't work for the way we do business today. It's the world is flat, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
yeah,
cool that you read that, Rob. And you're an erudite guy. I'm not fooled by your chill demeanor. You're a very well-read dude.
I'm very chalant behind the nonchalant front, if that makes any sense. But yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, no, it was a good book, and I think it made a lot of sense, and I do think that the part that appealed to me the most was the goal setting part, because I feel like I'm pretty usually in a work setting, I'm pretty autonomous once I understand what the assignment is. As long as you are very clear right up top about what the expectations are, I will make sure that gets done. But if it's, like you said, just somebody waiting to jump out at you when you make a mistake, that kind of management doesn't work for me at all. So.
Exactly. And I don't think it really works for anyone.
No.
It's like we all need, that's what Ken always says, who needs acknowledgement and praise? Everyone who's breathing,
Mm-hmm.
and we just don't have enough of that in this world. But, Rob, I thought of you when I was in Kauai because I read a book when I was there that I think you'd really like.
Oh yeah.
I've listened to a lot of your podcasts,
Oh,
and I know you're kind of interested in American history and
Oh, yeah.
politics a bit.
Definitely.
I read the Pulitzer Prize winning new biography of Martin Luther King
Oh,
called
wow.
King Alive by Jonathan Eig. I found out about, I can't believe I missed that book. I found out about it because I was a guest on a podcast where he'd
Mhm.
been a guest.
Oh,
And
wow.
and it was such a riveting book. It's almost 600 pages, but it it just completely, I could not put it down. I just flew through that book. It reads like a thriller. It ends, as we all know, as a tragedy, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I was super depressed for the like 2 days after reading it
Sure.
because it feels like a lot of the things that Martin Luther King fought for are being are eroding right now. But
Right.
it's interesting when I read that book. Ken actually, I don't know if you probably didn't get to this part in the biography yet, but Ken actually met Martin Luther King when he was a freshman at Cornell. Martin Luther King came to speak, and he actually got to meet him and was really impressed by him, and sort of adopted his servant leadership philosophy. So Martin Luther King was one of Ken's influences, and interestingly enough, later when Ken got he before he was a best-selling author and a business guru and leader of this global organization, Ken was a university professor. He taught business management at Cornell and at University of Massachusetts. And when he was at UMass, he was actually on one of the books that he always had his classes read was autobiography of Malcolm X.
Mhm.
And he ended up serving on the doctoral committee for Malcolm X's wife, Betty Shiraz. I think
Mhm.
that's how you pronounce her name. So,
Right.
some interesting connections there. But I thought I'd mention that book because it's really, Jonathan Eig is an amazing author. My hat is off to him, and he'd be a good guy to get on your show if you can get him.
Great. No, I was Googling as you were talking, and that's really interesting. Yeah, I will definitely check that out. Well, I did actually read your entire book, so I've read it cover to cover now. So
Oh my Lord.
yep.
That's highly unusual for a podcast host. So you're
I
lucky
try
if they
I try to get my Terry Gross on as much as I can and be as deeply researched as I can. But
kudos to you, man. I am going to review your
oh
podcast and get the
wow.
word out about it
Thank
because,
you. Appreciate
as I
it.
said, I'm a real fan.
Wow, that's very nice to hear. I appreciate that. But yeah, no, going back to the length of the book, I do think that is something that people don't, and your book isn't super long either. It was a good 200 pages, but it was still like it was readable and it was short. And I do think that some of my favorite books, maybe I'm just getting older, but like some of my favorite books are a little bit on the short side. And I think if you get in there, you say what you have to say, and that's it. You don't have to go on and on. So I do appreciate that the length. So
I
uh,
feel you. With the King biography, well, because he's actually,
no, I'm sure that's great too. I'm sure that's wonderful. But
yeah, he had to do that exhaustive. What
oh
made it
yeah,
so
of course.
fascinating is it was, I know I'm supposed to be promoting my own book, but as you can tell, I'm really enthusiastic
Oh
about
yeah.
this biography. But what made it so interesting is it's the first biography that's been written of Martin Luther King since they released the FBI files. And to read
Wow.
about how J. Edgar Hoover and Lyndon Johnson, had Martin Luther King in their crosshairs, not literally. I'm not implying any conspiracies here, but they definitely, were bugging his phone and doing all that. So
Right. Yeah. Well, I started reading. I still have to finish it, but I did start reading the book G-Man, J. Edgar Hoover, that biography that was a couple years ago. I think that also won the Pulitzer.
yeah.
But yes, that was interesting. Yeah, they had some stuff in there about MLK as well. So pretty amazing. But yeah, anyway, sorry, let's get back to your book. We're here to we're here to plug your book. But
Right.
yeah, so I do think it's interesting that this is an authorized biography because that probably gives you more access to the subject but then I guess on the other end of that, maybe there's some constraints to that too. How did that work out, being an authorized biography?
No constraints. It was interesting. I actually started gathering material to write this book in 2005.
Mm,
What happened was I had been writing a series of mystery novels, and then 9/11 happened,
mm,
and I just went back to the book I was working on, which was a thriller, and it was about, crime and punishment and all that stuff. And I just felt like, God, I don't feel like I'm making a positive contribution to the world. I want to use my talent for something uplifting. And around that time, I found out that Ken Blanchard, the one and only Ken Blanchard, needed an editor slash writer to work with him on his book publishing program. And I just jumped at the chance to do that. So, it didn't take long working with him to go, man, somebody needs to write the story of his life. So I started collecting all these papers and stuff back in 2005. And when I told people, hey, I want to write a biography of Ken, around his company, they're like, oh no, I don't know if that's a good idea. And Ken was like, what? No, he has no ego. And I finally kind of persuaded people that this might be a good idea. And so they gave me full access. I mean, his wife kept copies of their Christmas letters going back to 1965. I was able to go back into the archives and look at his doctoral dissertation from Cornell. So I had full access, being an authorized biography, I had full access to all his private papers. And it really made the writing harder, but also easier. It's like because I was overwhelmed by the material, how do I organize all this? But it was also wonderful to have all those, original documents.
right. How do you organize that much material when you're writing biography, just because there's probably so much to work with, right? I mean, I can't imagine how much paperwork you went through to write
It,
this.
there, yeah, there really is. And, so I organized it sort of as a cradle to grave
Hmm.
structure, beginning with his childhood and through his education and then sort of picked out the highlights and hopefully showed how he grew from, just someone he was always interested in leadership, as you know from reading the book. He was always serving in some sort of leadership role in his classes at school, president, and and then showing how his philosophy evolved about leading people, and to the point where it just became leadership is love. That's essentially what it is. It's serving others, and so it was weird. I had all this material, and then when COVID hit, I got COVID. I was in bed and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to put all this stuff together. And I just kind of scoped it out, made an outline, started sticking stuff into the relevant chapters, and just started writing. And it was pretty easy once I did that. It flowed, and so it was fun. It was daunting though, because I had never done a biography before. I've written and edited, I've edited hundreds of books and written, this is my seventh book, I think. But I'm a novelist, so I really wanted to bring some of those novel writing skills to the biography, so it wasn't just a dry, boring, this happened then, So
Hmm.
using a little bit of those techniques. And what I hope is that the book can inspire people who, whether you're wanting to become an author, whether you're wanting to start a business, whether you're wanting to be a speaker. There are so many lessons from Ken's life that I think people could be inspired by.
Hmm. Definitely. And of course, the One Minute Manager is the most popular book that he wrote. But um, how what's the legacy of that book? How did it change people's views on management? Because there does, you mentioned this in the book too, that there's, like, only so many percent of people are like happy in their job or like satisfied at work or feel like they're appreciated or whatever still. So, but this is sold like however many millions of copies. So I was telling my wife, I was like, this is at least several million people misunderstood this book, like of the people
Well,
that read it, because it couldn't be everybody that got the message.
I think a lot of people that got the message, it's as Ken always says, common sense isn't common practice. You have to. So I think there was a time when, like, there was a job I had back when I was like doing financial writing for a firm that they passed that book out, and if you had a management position, you were forced to read that book.
Mm-hmm.
Twist my arm. I'd already read it.
Right.
Brene Brown, who she's very well known
Yep.
researcher, Dare to Lead. She said somebody handed her the 1 Minute Manager in the 1990s, and it taught her everything she knows about leadership. She's like, Ken was the original one. He was talking about all these things long before any of the rest of us. So, um, did I answer your
Yeah,
question?
yeah,
No, I
no,
don't think.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Well, and it just seems like the philosophy to me is appealing
That's why
because
I wanted to publish this book too, because I wanted to keep the message alive. It's about catching people doing things right. It's about positive leadership, especially right now. There's just, such a focus on business as numbers and bean counting, and it's really, business is about people. It's about, what is the purpose? Why are you in business? Rob, why do you have a podcast? Why are you in business? And when you're doing your business, what connections are you making with other people, and are you lifting them up? And that's the message. So yeah, it's something that unfortunately, people hear it and they think it's nice, but they don't think it's going to help the bottom line. And that's another fallacy that I hope came clear in the biography. Ken's very own son, who is now the CEO of Blanchard, Ken stepped down as chief spiritual officer. He was never good with numbers, so he was never the CEO. But his son Scott is brilliant, and he used to think his dad was, soft and woo woo, and that, okay, dad, that all sounds nice, but money talks, BS walks, right?
hmm
And then he started doing research and, researching whether these techniques were really effective in terms of the bottom line. And what he found was they actually work. So it's like, when you get the relationships right, the results follow.
hmm And
So
yeah. Well, and it seems like the best way to lead people is not to lead them at all, but to let them make them lead themselves in a way. You know what I mean? Like you don't micromanage people to success. At least not me. I don't like that. That doesn't work for me at all. So,
no, and so that's the big fallacy about leadership. One of the big fallacies about leadership is that it's telling people what to do. And leadership, Ken always says, is an influence process. If you think about who are the people that had the greatest impact on you in your life, like I think of my second grade teacher who recognized that I was a talented writer, and she had such a profound influence on me, by catching me doing things right,
mhm.
and it's about encouraging and cheering people on. And it really does work.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good, I have four kids, and I definitely think that that concept is very important to, you know what I mean, to move people towards
Absolutely.
what
For your
behaviors want. So,
for your family too. Four kids. Wow, good on you. That's
thanks.
awesome.
But but yeah, so well, I was researching this book, and it did seem like there was some controversy some time ago that maybe some of this came from another author, Arthur Elliott Carlyle. Did you encounter that at all in your research, that controversy?
Oh, you mean the 1 Minute Manager?
Yes.
Yeah, well, one of the things about being successful is that people come out of the woodwork to
Hmm.
sue you and
True.
try to get a piece of the pie. And so, yeah, there was someone, this happened, many, what,
Right.
4 decades ago, where somebody tried to claim that it was his idea. And here's the thing, Rob. You're a writer as well. And I don't know if I know you're a journalist. I
Mhm.
don't know if have you written books as well?
Gosh, well, I need to talk to you about that.
Okay. Okay. Well,
But yes,
one
I
of the
would like
things
to.
when you're an author and you publish books and let's say you're doing an event, you're doing a book
Mhm.
signing, you would not believe the number of people who come up to you and say, "Oh, I have a great idea for a book."
Mm,
And it's not the idea, it's the execution of the idea.
right.
Somebody can have a great idea, but that doesn't make you the author of that book.
Mhm.
You know, so I think a lot of these, people might think that because Ken is drawing on common sense, and
Right.
people might think, well, I had that idea, and it's
Yeah.
not true. So anyway, that was a lawsuit that was, successfully
Mhm.
handled among many lawsuits that were successfully
Sure.
handled by Ken and his organization. People come after you when you're
Right.
successful.
Well, and I think that was the other thing I was going to say is the concepts are so, like you said, common sense, universal. It feels like almost found knowledge, you know what I mean, of from the universe or whatever, that it was just happened to be codified in this one place. But that catching people doing things the right way, you know what I mean, that's an idea that's been around, but that's somebody had to put all the pieces together at some point, right? So,
Exactly. And, it's what the value added is that, the person, Ken has this uncanny ability. He's authored 70 books. There was another huge bestseller called Raving Fans, and,
mhm.
for customer service. But his books have a way of sticking, and people remember and apply.
Mhm.
Well, not enough, as we talked about, but
Yeah.
it's how you execute that idea and whether it can really inspire people.
Right. You've written about, or this biography of a writer. You are a writer yourself. You're an editor. What's your advice to people that want to write a book, or have kind of an idea inside of them? Like, what's the first steps to take? What to do?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, if you want to write a book, there's something that you have to say that needs to be said, because only you can write that book. Um, what I tell my classes is, because I teach writing workshops, um, you need to be aware of what else is out there
Yeah.
in your genre.
Hmm.
And the first step, and I mentioned it in passing, is to write a book proposal. And there are all kinds of tools on the internet for how to write a book proposal. Um, but the process of writing a book proposal will really help you hone that idea, because you'll get your elevator pitch, you'll
Right.
get what else is out in the market, the competitive titles. It will help you really formulate why the book needs to be written. And a lot of times in the course of writing your book proposal, you'll find that the idea you thought you had isn't the one, but there's one behind it. So
Mhm.
it's a process. But a lot
Right.
of people, I think, another thing to do is, do not write an entire manuscript
Mm.
and waste 9 months or a year of your life doing that without writing the proposal first and getting feedback from editors and literary agents,
Right.
whether this is a viable project or not.
Hmm.
So that's my suggestion. And then always pick up a copy of Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. It's the
Mm.
finest book on writing. It's hilarious. She's an extraordinarily gifted writer, and it will be your companion and guide through the
Great.
writing process.
Wow, you've given me some really good book recommendations. I should I should have guessed with your biography there. Yeah, I read in your biography you also teach yoga.
Well, I'm a longtime practitioner of yoga.
Okay.
I'm not actually a teacher, although I suppose I could teach a class. I don't have my teacher training, but I discovered yoga when I was 18 years old, and I'm now 69 years old.
That's
So
great.
that's a long time to be practicing. But I found bliss, and it's a wonderful way to maintain strength and balance and flexibility, but also there came a time in my life where I could no longer do substances because I'd
Mhm.
done too many of them.
Yeah,
And yoga is definitely my pathway to bliss. So,
that's great. Well, great. Well, that's most of the questions I had about your book and everything. Was there anything else we didn't talk about that you think it's important for people to know?
let's see. Anything we didn't talk about that's important to know? I think we covered a lot of good territory. If you enjoy reading biography, or if you're looking for some inspiration, so a positive story. Yeah, pre-order a copy. The book will come out on October 21. I don't know when this episode will air, but it's
I can.
available wherever books are sold. If you want to know more about it, you can visit my website, marthalawrence.com. It's MarthaLawrence.com. And the book again is Catch People Doing Things Right.
Hmm. So it'll be a couple days beforehand, but that's enough time to read the 1 Minute Manager, and you could even squeeze in Who Moved My Cheese, probably.
Yeah, Who Moved My Cheese? Wonderful book that Ken wrote the forward to that, and that's Spencer Johnson's
Yep.
book, also an amazing book. And you know what? If you have any listeners out there who are in leadership positions in organizations, and you're wondering, if you've got any issues within your organizations, check out Blanchard.com. There's something for everyone there, whether you're an individual contributor or you're looking for an initiative to help a gigantic organization. There are all kinds of leadership tools on that website.
Excellent. Well, I didn't have to read the book all the way through, but I did, so that should say something, right? So people should go out
Wow.
and read it.
Wow.
So.
Deeply honored, Rob. Deeply honored, and so glad I discovered you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's very nice of you to say. And the last question I ask before we go is, what music have you been listening to lately?
I'm so boring. I'm so
Oh,
terribly,
that can't be true.
terribly. I'm terribly boring.
That can't be true.
I, you know, lately I've listened to I go between Mozart piano concertos or Van Morrison. Figure that out. I
Oh,
don't know.
okay.
So Into the Mystic, I just had a hankering to hear that song Into the Mystic, and
Nice.
my partner, who is quite a bit younger than I am, she was listening with me and she's like, I don't get it. It's not my kind of music, and, what can I say?
That's funny. Yeah, you just have to be there, I guess, but that's fine.
Yeah, but I also listening to slack key guitar because I was over there in Hawaii. So
Oh, nice. Very
yeah.
cool. Excellent. Well, I'm headed to Las Vegas later this month, so I'm debating whether I want to try to busk on the strip, but I've heard that it's hard going there for
Really? Oh,
entertainers.
why not? Just do it for the experience,
Yeah, no, I
Rob.
will. Yeah.
Awesome.
I did it on the Balboa Pier last month in San Diego, so
I heard about that. I heard about
I'm one
that.
for one. So
Yeah. Yeah.
great.
Oh, great.
Well, it was great to speak with you this evening finally, and yeah, congratulations on the book. And like I said, everyone should check it out, and definitely read Ken Blanchard's many books.
Absolutely. Well, keep on keeping on, Rob. You're doing good work out there, and tip of the hat to you.
Thank you. All right, well, have a good evening.
You too. Bye.